Okay, so let's continue. Wanted to continue talking about the final paper. So a couple other points, important points here. So remember that you're pretending that you're an abolitionist in the year 1859, right? You're an 1850s abolitionist. I think I said living in Boston around, the close of the Civil War. There's a couple of implications of this, I think. So first of all, I think you can and really should mimic some of the language used in primary sources, the primary sources. So, and I would say, this can be a fun aspect of this assignment. So, kind of utilize this like antiquated 19th century American English to the extent that you can. I would imagine some people will go further with this than other people, and that's totally fine. I don't want you to get bogged down in coming up with the perfect the perfect impression of antiquated 19th century English. So I would say like embrace that to a certain extent. But even more than that, embrace, and this goes back to what I was talking about at the end of the first video, try and embrace thinking historically, putting yourself in the shoes of someone who's a northerner in the 1850s, right? Yeah, so keep in mind the perspective of a typical abolitionist in the 1850s, along with the opinions of the average northerner, right? And this is a little tricky, but kind of makes sense if you think about it. So I think, for example, it's up to you. So you could claim to believe that you believe in full racial equality, or you could even stop short of this to a certain extent. So some abolitionists, like William Lloyd Garrison, for example, claim to believe in essentially full Black equality with whites, full racial equality. Some abolitionists didn't, right? A lot of abolitionists didn't. Abraham Lincoln certainly didn't, right? And even after becoming president and changing his point of view to a certain extent, it depends on your interpretation of Lincoln, but most scholars, most historians would say never fully embraced in a contemporary sense, Black equality with whites, full racial equality. So anyway, kind of keep that in mind, right? So I think regardless of your point of view, your hypothetical, fictitious point of view, via your embodiment of someone who's an abolitionist in 1859 living in Boston, it certainly wouldn't make sense for you to describe a world in which everyone or anywhere close to everyone favored racial equality, right? So I think that's important to keep in mind as you sort of as you go about constructing your paper here. Also, kind of as I mentioned in the first video as well, feel free to use primary sources, use the textbook, use the lecture videos. And in fact, I think good papers will make good use of these documents, of just things that you've encountered in the class, right? You don't have to use formal citations. Formal citations are definitely not required. However, you want to identify, basically make sure it's clear to me what it is you're talking about, right? So if you're, in a basic sense, like if you're quoting or referring to something that Frederick Douglass said, you want to say, according to Frederick Douglass, right? According to Douglass, especially if you're quoting, but even if you're sort of paraphrasing, referencing, and yeah, it's not a bad idea to, if there's information that you would assume isn't totally common knowledge, you could reference, as in Mr. Schloss's lecture videos, as William Maclay makes clear. But again, you don't have to use formal parenthetical citations or footnotes or anything like that. And by the way, kind of the reason for that, usually in an essay, you would have to use some kind of formal citations in some way, shape, or form. In this case, you're not relying upon outside information. All of the sources you're relying upon are from this class, were given to you by me, right? So like, I know what you're referring to as long as you're clear about it, right? Wasting time, or I think basically doing footnotes, even parenthetical citations, and me having to sort of police, are you doing that correctly? you having to take the time to figure out what citations I'm looking for, like that's kind of a waste of everyone's time in this case. So that's kind of the thinking behind that. Okay, so let's get to writing. So keep in mind that I'm scoring you in writing. And then I'm definitely, as I think I mentioned in the first video, I'm definitely a stickler when it comes to writing. I definitely take writing seriously. And by the way, the overall idea behind that, I try not to be sort of picky, pedantic, whatever, however you want to sort of label it, with regards to writing. I'm not sort of, my intention is not to catch students with their, like you're a 5-year-old with your hand in the cookie jar or something, like, oh, you violated this rule of grammar, so I'm going to get really angry about it, and that's -1 point, or this is -2 points for spelling this word wrong. That's not really the point. The point is professionalism, and even more than that, the point is a lot of mistakes, a lot of grammatical spelling mistakes, and even more than that, just, students, a lot of students have a tendency to word things in just not the most ideal way to word them, right? You're just not, if you're not phrasing things in the ideal way, if there's a lot of mistakes, at a certain point, like, that means that you're not communicating in the clearest and most concise way. And that makes it hard for me to tell what the heck it is that you're trying to say. Right. And then, from a greater, teachers, instructors perspective, you get into this thing of like, okay, I could spend an hour combing through your essay, reading through it over and over again, and maybe I could uncover some like diamonds in the rough, right? Maybe you are really understanding this and you're just not communicating it the best way, but, like, I don't have time to do that. And also that's not fair to other students, right? When there's other students who, constructed their essay in such a professional, and their essay was professionally put together, well designed, and artfully conceived and executed in such a way that I can read through it once and I can understand all their points, and like that's an essay that's just going to get a higher grade, right? So that's kind of the overall idea with that. Let me talk about some writing do's and don'ts, and I think let's see, hold on. Happened to, here we go. Yeah, let me talk about some writing do's and don'ts. And I think I'm going to display this on the website. I'll put this up on the website in the next day or two as well. So here's some kind of do's and don'ts and things to keep in mind that I'll cover right now. And then again, I'll put this document that I'm using up on the website. So first of all, I think it's important to write in a formal style. In this case, with an antiquated twist, right? So write in a formal style as if you're writing in a formal style in the year 1859, right? So it's a little bit different than other essays, but that means avoiding contraction. So you don't want to say wasn't, right? You want to say was not. You don't want to say isn't. You want to say is not, right? Murky prose, bad grammar, consistently poor spelling will definitely lower your grade. So keep that in mind. Write simply and directly. I can't really emphasize that enough. Simple and direct language is almost always better. So your paper should be free of sentence fragments and run-on sentences as well. Avoid long, convoluted sentences, right? Avoid grandiose language. Do not use many words when a few will suffice, right? That kind of gets into this idea of simple and direct communication. Do not use words you do not understand, and also do not write a long introductory paragraph. Yeah, so you don't need, maybe that wouldn't apply as much to this essay, but I think with essay writing in general and with this writing assignment, I think this would apply to a certain extent. Yeah, like get to the point. Right? Your point is to dismantle Fitze's argument. So really, at the very beginning, close to the beginning of your essay, you should be, getting into what Fitze was saying and your rebuttal to that, your response to that, and your more broadly defense of human freedom, right? The concept of human freedom. Use the past tense when writing about historical events, right? So for example, Washington commanded the Continental Army, right? Jefferson signed the Declaration of Independence. So all history takes place in the past. You want to use the past tense when talking about historical concepts, events, etc. Keep that in mind. Use active voice instead of passive voice, right? So for example, many Federalists believe that Alexander Hamilton was a financial genius, right? That's a far more compelling way to phrase things than it was believed that Alexander Hamilton was a financial genius, right? So the former wording, the former phrasing, The first phrasing includes the subject, the latter does not include the subject, and thus begs the question of who believed that Hamilton was a genius, a financial genius, right? A really simple example, I threw the ball is better than the ball was thrown by me, right? And really, if for no other reason than it's more simple, it's simpler, it's more direct, right? So that gets back to kind of my second point. Okay, avoid long quotations. So I think you do want to use some quotations here, especially from Fitzhugh, right? So you really want to establish what Fitzhugh is saying, and it's good to quote Fitzhugh, right? But don't go overboard with that, right? So it's perfectly acceptable, though not required, to include some quotations in your paper. But yeah, it's not acceptable to quote long blocks of material. I do read papers here and there where pretty clearly, students are using a lot of quotes, and the point is like they're using it as filler material. So don't do that. Avoid doing that. I think it's important in any essay, and this essay included, to begin each paragraph at the topic sentence that includes the main point of the material of that paragraph, right? So I should be able to read the first sentence of your paragraph, and I should know what it is that you're talking about in that paragraph, right? It's sort of a thesis statement for that paragraph in a sense, right? And speaking of thesis statement, I think there's different ways. I think, as I said in the basic instructions, the official instruction sheet for this final paper assignment, I think I said like you can construct this essay in different ways, and I would stick to that. I think that's definitely true. I think you want to make it clear, however you construct the essay, you want to make it clear what your main arguments are, countering Fitzhugh's arguments, right? So whether that's a formal thesis statement at the end of your first paragraph or not, I think different students can approach it differently. In other essay assignments, if this were any other essay assignment, I would probably say pretty definitively, like, you need to have a thesis. Your thesis needs to lay out what your paper is about, and that needs to go at the end of the first paragraph. I'll give you more freedom. In this case, I mean, you're defending the concept of human freedom, so it'd be hypocritical of me to not give you freedom and some freedom in writing your essay, but make it clear what your main points are, even if that's just at the end of your essay, kind of encapsulating your main points, your main critiques, your main rebuttals to Fitzhugh and defenses of freedom and liberty and democracy and equality and et cetera. Okay. So use a standard font and standard margin. So basically, your paper should be 12-point font, Times New Roman. Let's just go with Times New Roman. I think that'll be easier. I think, double spaced, obviously. I think I said 4 to 5 pages. Yeah, so really at least 4 pages. And by the way, when you go to a new paragraph, you could do a little indent or even a sizable indent, but don't skip lines between paragraphs. That's something that irritates professors and instructors, because again, it just comes across as like you're trying to finagle, trick me into, thinking that you wrote 4 pages when you really didn't. So when you want to go to a new paragraph, just go to the next line. You could do a nice size indent to emphasize the organizational, the fact that your essay is well organized, but just go to the next line, indent, and start the next paragraph, right? But again, 12-point font, Times New Roman, and double spaced. Write at least 4 pages. I wouldn't go too far beyond 5 pages. If you want to do 5.5, 6 pages, that's probably okay. But the assignment, this isn't a 15-page assignment. If you write 15 pages, I'm not going to read all 15 pages. I'll just tell you that right now. But really, it should be at least 4 pages. That's the main thing. If you write less than 4 pages, that will likely affect your grade. And lastly, proofread. Right. This is I would say maybe more than anything else, this is the thing that students should do when they're writing an essay that they don't do. Proofread, edit. So even the best writers, you would be shocked if you read the first draft of you take your famous, your favorite book, whatever your favorite book is in the world of fiction, the world of nonfiction. It could be a history book, it could be about science or about anything. If you read the first draft, you would be shocked at how terrible the writing is, probably, right? So the best writers, they go through it time and time and time again. They read through it, they think about it, they revise, they proofread, they edit. So I would say, definitely don't turn your essay in until you've read through it a few times, right? And I would read through it carefully. Line by line, and think about, even beyond grammatical errors and spelling mistakes and that kind of thing, think about what's a simpler and more direct way to phrase what I'm trying to say. What would make this more effective in terms of an essay, in terms of making the case that I'm trying to make. So yeah, edit, proofread as much as I think. I'm really looking forward to reading your guys' essays. I think this is, hopefully you'll find this to be an interesting assignment. And from reading your guys' essay progress checks, I would say you're very much on the right track so far. And I'm curious to hear your best defenses of human freedom, your best critiques of and rebuttals to George Fitzhugh. He's a clever guy, but he's wrong. Remember that you're on the right side of history. So you have that going for you. So, and again, it's okay. Have a good one, guys. Thanks.